For console gamers, one of the most consistent battles has been getting a quality controller that holds off the inevitable stick drift as long as possible. And some companies like Thrustmaster have even gone as far as to make replacement hot swap modules for when the sticks do start drifting. Gamesir is doing things differently though with an Xbox controller that uses contactless, Hall effect magnetic sensors that should, in theory, last much longer than the industry standard potentiometer that we find in most joysticks. And of course, we have this brand new Gamesir G7 SE controller with Hall effect sensors here in the joysticks. And let's dive in and take a closer look at how this controller performs for the $45 price point. Thanks for watching 9 to 5 Toys. Be sure to like, subscribe, and enable notifications with that bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Hey everyone, I'm Jordan with 9 to 5 Toys. We are checking out the Gamesir G7 SE, and for those who have been battling stick drift for years and really frustrated by the quality of controllers, this might be the saving grace for a lot of console players. Now, the main issue with the industry standard potentiometers that are used in most gamepads is that there is a physical contact in the module, inside the joystick, that will inevitably start to wear down over time. And oftentimes they have issues even right out of the box. A Hall effect sensor, on the other hand, uses magnets to create a magnetic field to send a signal, and thus doesn't have to have physical pieces in contact to send that signal from a joystick. So theoretically, this results in a much longer lifespan, as it shouldn't wear down as quickly as sticks with physical contacts in the sensors. It kind of seems like a no-brainer to go with this design in a gaming controller, and it's surprising that a lot of other big brands haven't done it yet. You know, is it because it's a lot more expensive, prohibitively expensive, or is it because they want you to replace their controllers after a little while? We don't quite know for sure, but Gamesir has seen that issue and is hoping to put an end to stick drift by using these sensors, or at least, you know, delaying it a lot longer than what the standard controllers can do. And Gamesir, you know, this isn't their first controller. They have a history of doing some other controllers as well, so it's not like they're brand new to this business. But let's talk about this controller specifically, the G7 SE, and this one is designed for Xbox, so it's going to work with your Series X, and Series S also work on a PC just fine. And the shape of it is very familiar, although it is kind of updated and changed from the stock controller. I have a Series X controller right here, and it might be kind of hard to tell, you know, directly, but I do find that there is just a little bit more size kind of in the bottom of the handle here, where it actually sits in the palm of my hand. So it feels a little bit more substantial there, which I think it's a little bit easier to grip. Whereas the stock controller feels maybe a little bit slimmer, maybe a little bit longer, and sits a little bit further down in like kind of the, you know, meat of my palm there. But otherwise, they're pretty similar. You know, it's not as different of design as what like the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma is, and I found this controller to be plenty comfortable when playing some longer sessions of Forza Horizon 5. And on the back side of the controller, across the handles here, you can see that there is a textured finish that's going to help with grip. You'll also find that same finish on the triggers and the bumper or shoulder buttons up here as well. And additionally, while looking at the back of the controller, you'll notice there are two back buttons, and these are mappable. And they're fairly large, and for me and how I grip a controller, they are perfectly positioned for me to easily be able to actuate those. I don't have to modify my grip at all, which is really nice. And mapping them is very simple as well. All you have to do is hold the M button, which is on the front here on the bottom, and the button you want to map it to, so we'll do the right button. You hold those for 3 seconds and the light will start flashing, and then you press the button you want to map. So I'll push B, the light goes solid, and then that button is mapped to the back button. The buttons I do feel are kind of large and kind of easy to press, or maybe a little bit accidentally easy to press, and Gamesir has put in a nice feature where you can kind of lock those so they cannot be pressed. So if there are some titles where you want to use the back buttons and some titles where you don't, or if you're swapping controllers with a friend and you know want to change that, flip over this little button here and then you cannot press the button down. So very easy way to disable those. And so really one of the main features and most impressive parts about this is the joysticks here. Once again, that $45 price point. I think MSRP was maybe $50, but it's down to $45 right now. Using the gamepad tester, which you can just find online, it's given some really incredible numbers. You can see it easily and quickly snaps back to that 0.00002 factor on both sticks, no matter what direction you are kind of quickly snapping it to. And you'll see, we'll also test the stock controller. You can see the difference there in between those controllers. And also, just like the slightest little movements will start to register an input on there too. So pretty impressive numbers when looking at the performance of the sticks. We can also click this test circularity and just kind of move these sticks around here. You can see that the average error is pretty darn good at just 0.5%, which once again, when we swap over to the stock controller, you'll see how big of a difference that is. So some really impressive input from this controller. All right, and so now we are using the stock Series X controller, and you can see as we move around here, actually, let me turn that off. Just look at the axis kind of drift numbers right now. When we snap them and they go back to the middle, you can see they are not going back to that same small amount. There's always a little bit of input in there, and that's where that stick drift starts to, show itself. And that's why in certain games you have to adjust the dead zone so that you don't have a little input that makes your character or whatever start moving across the screen when you don't want it to. So while those aren't like crazy high numbers, it's definitely higher than the Gamesir and doesn't perform nearly as well. And then we'll click on the test circularity, move the sticks around. You can see that average error. It just kind of keeps growing every time I make another pass on here. So you can see we're at like 9.5 on one, 11, getting up to 12 on the other. Well, we're up to 10.5 on the other one. So the average error is a lot higher than what it was on the Gamesir. And so this, like I said, this is the stock Xbox Series X wireless controller. So definitely not as consistent and not as good performance out of this controller. Another thing that I want to mention is even just in use, putting these to the extremes and moving them around, you feel a little bit more resistance when you have it in the corners and moving around the edge of the controller. And the Gamesir does have kind of anti-friction rings, which I do think obviously help with that. So that's not to say that the Gamesir, won't start to get a little bit rough. It's hard for me to say at this point, but right now it feels incredibly smooth. And with those numbers, the controller feels very precise as well. And while the sticks feel incredible, the rest of the buttons on here, they're fine. Nothing crazy to, write home about. The buttons on here, they are just like a membrane. They do feel a little bit tighter than what the stock Series X controller does. That one has a little bit more play to it and just feels a little bit more loose and sloppy, where things feel a little bit tighter on the Gamesir controller. But it is still kind of that mushy membrane experience. Same thing on the D-pad over here. It's very quiet, but also pretty mushy. It doesn't have a kind of premium feel like what the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma does with their actual mechanical switches in there. Gives a really nice feel and some tactile feedback and sound to it. These are kind of more what we're used to with most controllers, which is just kind of that standard mushy membrane feel. Now, granted, I haven't had any issues actuating any of these buttons. Like, all the face buttons work just fine, which was not the case with the, Microsoft's own premium Elite 2 core controller, which you can check out our review of that up here, which really broke my heart. But I've had no issues with the Gamesir. Everything has performed flawlessly for me. So I've been really impressed with the overall quality of this controller, especially at that price point. So overall, just wrapping up here, if you've been burned by stick drift in the past and you're trying to find a good option for a controller that you can reliably use for a long time, I do think that this is a great choice. At $45, it's incredibly affordable when compared to some of the really high-end aftermarket third-party controllers. This one does have the inclusion of the back buttons in the back here, which I think are very useful for a lot of FPS games. So definitely a nice feature there. Everything else feels solid and the sticks feel just incredible. Granted, this is a wired controller. So for some people, that's going to be a big downside because, kind of the benefit or the allure of a console is playing wirelessly from your couch and not worrying about any wires running up to the TV. So if that's an issue for you, then you might want to look for something else. But if you don't mind that, this is a super, super solid controller for the price, and I'm anxious to see how this performs over time, if it has any issues, or if the Hall effect sensors in here really do live up to the hype of being able to kind of put an end to stick drift. So I'm excited to hear what you think about it. Put down in the comments whether you'll be picking up this controller or something else. And thanks for watching. If you're looking for some other videos to watch, I'll link to our review of the Xbox Core 2 Elite, as well as our most recent video. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up so others can find it easier, and consider subscribing. This is Jordan with 9to5 Toys.